If you are just tuning in right now, you need to understand what has happened in the last few hours because this is one of those moments that could reshape global security for years to come. And I am not exaggerating. Let me walk you through everything we know, everything that has been confirmed, and what the real implications are for the United States and its allies around the world. So here is where we start. Within the last hour, Iran has publicly confirmed that its primary uranium processing facility has been struck. Now, let that sink in for a second. This is not some minor installation on the outskirts of nowhere. This is the central hub of Iran's nuclear enrichment program, and officials in Tehran are now on record saying the site sustained direct hits. They are also saying, and this is important, that there is no radiation leakage at this time. Whether that statement holds up in the coming days, we will have to wait and see because independent verification in a situation like this takes time, and Iran does not exactly have a track record of full transparency with the international community. What we do not have confirmed yet is whether this strike was carried out by the United States or by Israel. Both nations have been conducting extensive military operations as part of what has been designated Operation Epic Fury, and both have the capability and the stated intent to degrade Iran's nuclear infrastructure. That ambiguity in itself is strategic. Keeping the adversary uncertain about who hit what and when adds another layer of pressure to an already overwhelmed Iranian command structure. Now, here's the part that has really grabbed the attention of military analysts around the world. And honestly, this should concern every single American who cares about national security. Iran launched two ballistic missiles at the island of Diego Garcia. If you are not familiar with Diego Garcia, let me explain why this matters so much. Diego Garcia is a remote atoll in the Indian Ocean, and it hosts one of the most strategically important U.S. military installations on the planet. It serves as a staging ground for bomber operations, a logistics hub for naval forces operating across the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf, and a critical node in America's global power projection architecture. It is roughly 4,000 kilometers from Iran. That is about 2,500 miles. And here is the key detail that changes the entire calculus of this conflict. For years, the Iranian regime publicly stated that the maximum range of its ballistic missile arsenal was approximately 1,300 miles. Their leadership, including the late Supreme Leader, repeatedly insisted that Iran's missile program was defensive in nature and limited in reach. They told the world, and they told it with a straight face, that they did not possess the technology to strike targets at intercontinental distances. That was a lie. The launch of these two missiles toward Diego Garcia proves beyond any doubt that Iran has been developing long range ballistic missile capabilities in secret, capabilities that far exceed what they ever admitted to possessing. Now, before anyone panics, let me give you the operational outcome. According to reporting from major outlets, one of those two missiles failed during flight and came down in the Indian Ocean. It never reached its target. The second missile was intercepted and destroyed by a guided missile destroyer, one of the U.S. Navy's Aegis-equipped warships that are specifically designed to knock down incoming ballistic threats. So the immediate danger was neutralized. The physical damage was zero. But the strategic implications are enormous, and I want to make sure you understand why. If Iran can launch a missile 2,500 miles, that means European capitals are now within range. That means additional U.S. military installations across the region are within range. That means the threat envelope just expanded dramatically, and every defense planner in Washington and Brussels and London is right now recalculating their risk assessments based on this new reality. This is not hypothetical anymore. This is demonstrated capability. Whether the missiles hit their target or not is almost secondary to the fact that they got off the ground and traveled that distance. It tells us Iran has been lying about its arsenal for a very long time, and it tells us there may be other capabilities they have not yet revealed. Now, let me take you through the broader military picture because what is happening right now across the theater of operations is staggering in its scale. President Trump addressed the nation from West Palm Beach before departing for Washington, and he said something that carries a lot of weight. He believes this conflict is beginning to wind down. His exact sentiment, posted on his social media platform, was that Iran has been, in his words, significantly degraded and that the United States is getting closer to achieving its core objectives. Those objectives, as outlined by Secretary of Defense Hegseth and the Joint Chiefs, include the complete degradation of Iran's nuclear program, the destruction of its ballistic missile and launch infrastructure, and the dismantling of its defense industrial base. Those are not small goals. Those are the kinds of objectives that reshape a nation's military capacity for a generation, and the numbers back up the progress. According to Pentagon briefings, the United States and the Israeli Air Force have collectively flown more than 15,000 combat missions since this conflict began 3 weeks ago. They have struck approximately 8,000 targets across Iran. Let me say that again, 8,000 targets in 3 weeks. To put that in perspective, the entire air campaign during the first Gulf War in 1991 hit roughly the same number of targets over the course of 6 weeks. This pace of operations is extraordinary, and it reflects the technological advantages and logistical capacity that the U.S. military brings to bear when it commits to a full-scale air campaign. Among the platforms being deployed, and this is a fascinating tactical detail, the A-10 close air support aircraft has been conducting strafing runs along the Iranian coastline. The A-10 is a legendary airframe built around a massive rotary cannon, and it is being used to engage small watercraft associated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps naval forces. These are the fast boats and armed patrol vessels that the IRGC has used for years to threaten commercial shipping and U.S. Navy vessels in the Persian Gulf. Having A-10s running low-altitude attack passes against these assets is a clear signal that the U.S. is not just going after strategic targets, it is systematically dismantling Iran's ability to project force at every level. Now let us talk about the nuclear strikes specifically. And I want to be very precise with my language here because this is a sensitive and consequential subject. The strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities were part of what the Pentagon has referred to as Midnight Hammer. This was a designated phase of Operation Epic Fury that was always planned for the latter stages of the campaign. Military officials have explained the logic behind the sequencing, and it makes complete strategic sense. You do not go after nuclear sites first. Those facilities are hardened and deeply buried, but they do not shoot back. What does shoot back are the surface-to-air missile batteries, the radar installations, the command and control nodes, and the ballistic missile launchers that protect those nuclear sites. So the first 2 weeks of the campaign were focused on systematically destroying Iran's integrated air defense network. The Pentagon now says that network is degraded by roughly 90%. That means the skies over Iran are, for practical purposes, permissive for U.S. and Israeli aircraft. Once that air defense umbrella was torn apart, the path was clear to go after the nuclear infrastructure, with far less risk to pilots and air crews. That is textbook air campaign doctrine, and it has been executed with precision. However, and this is a critical however, not all of Iran's capability has been eliminated. Earlier today, Iran managed to launch approximately 60 drones targeting Saudi Arabia. Now, the details on the outcome of that drone attack are still coming in, but the fact that Iran was able to coordinate and launch 60 unmanned aerial vehicles tells us that while their military has been severely degraded, it has not been completely neutralized. They still have pockets of capability. They still have launch assets that have survived the bombing campaign, and they are still willing to use them against regional targets. This is why the operation is ongoing, and why military leaders are cautioning against premature declarations of victory. In response to continued threats across the theater, defensive systems have been activated across multiple locations. U.S. forces in Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates have gone to heightened alert postures, And missile defense assets, including Patriot batteries and terminal high altitude area defense systems, are fully operational and engaging incoming threats as they emerge. The timing of all of this adds another layer of complexity and sensitivity. This is occurring during the final days of Ramadan, a period that is supposed to be one of reflection, peace, and celebration across the Muslim world. The fact that major combat operations are occurring during this holy period has drawn attention and concern from leaders across the region, and it underscores the gravity of the situation. No one wanted this to be happening right now, but the operational timeline has its own logic, and military commanders on both sides are operating according to their own strategic imperatives, regardless of the calendar. Now, I want to shift to something that represents potentially the next major phase of this conflict, and it is something that should be on every American's radar. 2,000 United States Marines are currently deploying from San Diego, and their apparent destination is Kharg Island. If you do not know what Kharg Island is, you need to understand its significance because this could become one of the defining strategic moves of the entire campaign. Kharg Island sits in the northern Persian Gulf, not far from the coastlines of both Iran and Kuwait. It is a relatively small island, but it is arguably the single most important piece of real estate in Iran's entire economy. Approximately 96% of Iran's oil exports flow through the terminal facilities on Kharg Island. Let that number register: 96%. That means virtually all of the revenue that funds Iran's government, its military, its proxy networks across the Middle East, and its nuclear program passes through this one location. Taking control of Kharg Island would be an economic knockout blow of almost unprecedented proportions. It would cut off Iran's primary source of income overnight. It would eliminate their ability to fund continued military operations. And it would give the United States extraordinary leverage in any future negotiations over the terms of a ceasefire or a broader peace agreement. The Marine deployment from San Diego is expected to take approximately 1 month to reach the operational area. That timeline is consistent with a full amphibious task force making the transit across the Pacific and through the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf. During that transit, those Marines will be training, planning, and rehearsing for what could be one of the most consequential amphibious operations since the Korean War. There is also a broader strategic dimension to this move that goes beyond the immediate military objective. President Trump has historically framed international negotiations in transactional terms. He looks at leverage, he looks at assets, he looks at what each side has that the other side wants. If the United States takes control of Kharg Island, it holds something that Iran desperately needs: its economic lifeline. That creates a negotiating position of extraordinary strength, and it fits perfectly within the framework that this administration has used in other international dealings. Whether you agree with that approach or not, the strategic logic is undeniable. Now, let me bring this all together and give you my honest assessment of where things stand. 3 weeks into this conflict, the United States and Israel have achieved remarkable military results by any historical standard. 8,000 targets struck across a nation the size of Iran is a massive accomplishment. The degradation of Iran's air defense network by 90% means the coalition has near total air superiority. The strikes against nuclear facilities represent the fulfillment of a strategic objective that multiple administrations over the past 2 decades discussed but never acted upon. The revelation that Iran possesses ballistic missiles with ranges far exceeding what they publicly claimed is deeply troubling, but also valuable intelligence. Now, the world knows the truth about Iran's missile capabilities, and defensive planning can be adjusted accordingly. The interception of the Diego Garcia bound missile by a U.S. Navy destroyer demonstrates that American missile defense systems work and that the forward deployed naval forces are capable of protecting critical assets even against unexpected threats. But this conflict is not over. Iran's ability to launch drone swarms at Saudi Arabia shows residual capability that still poses a real threat to regional allies. The continued need for defensive systems across Kuwait and the Emirates tells us that the danger to U.S. personnel and partner nations remains active and real. And the deployment of Marines toward Kharg Island signals that the United States is preparing for the possibility that this conflict extends beyond the air campaign into a ground and naval dimension that carries its own set of risks and complications. What I think is most important for every American to understand right now is that we are watching a pivotal moment in modern military history unfold in real time. The decisions being made in the next few weeks by leaders in Washington and Tehran will shape the security landscape of the Middle East and potentially the world for decades to come. The scale of the operations, the sophistication of the weapon systems being employed, the strategic objectives being pursued, all of it points to a conflict that is far more consequential than many people initially realized. I also want to emphasize something that I think gets lost in the rapid pace of breaking news coverage. There are American service members in harm's way right now. There are pilots flying combat missions over hostile territory. There are sailors on destroyers intercepting incoming ballistic missiles. There are Marines preparing for a potential amphibious operation in one of the most contested waterways on Earth. These are real people with families back home, and they are executing their mission with the professionalism and courage that has defined the American military for generations. Whatever your political views, whatever your opinion on the policy decisions that led to this moment, those men and women deserve our respect and our support. I will continue to monitor the situation as it develops and bring you every confirmed update as it comes in. The next 24 to 48 hours are going to be absolutely critical. We are waiting on confirmation of the full extent of damage to Iran's nuclear facilities. We are watching for any additional missile launches or retaliatory strikes from Iran. We are tracking the Marine deployment and any indications of the operational timeline for Kharg Island. And we are listening for any diplomatic signals that might suggest either side is ready to move toward a ceasefire. This is a story that affects every American, and I promise you, I will keep bringing you the facts, the analysis, and the context you need to understand what is happening and why it matters. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on because in situations like this, information is moving fast and you do not want to miss a single update. Stay safe out there, stay informed, and I will see you in the next one.